What does this sign mean? I get this question all the time. What does it mean when I see white feathers? What does it mean when I'm seeing boats everywhere? What does it mean when I see repeating numbers like 1111? What does it mean when I dream about doors? What does it mean when I see a stag walk across the road? And what does it mean when I find money all the time? And whilst I understand why people keep asking these questions, I actually think they're the wrong questions. In fact, I think we've completely misunderstood what manifestation signs actually are. And once you understand this, you'll never look at signs in the same way again. In fact, you'll never look at manifestation in the same way again, because I don't believe the sign itself is the message. I believe the sign is the language. The message is something much deeper. Now, let me explain what I mean. Think about your conscious mind. Your conscious mind thinks in words. If I asked you to explain your favorite holiday, you'd use language, you'd use words. You'd describe the beach, the sand, the water, the hotel, the weather, the sights, the food. Words are the language of your conscious mind, but your subconscious is completely different. Your subconscious doesn't communicate in words. It communicates through symbols and images, also through emotions and sensations and behaviors and patterns. In fact, if you stop and think about it, long before any of us could even read, long before any of us could write, long before any of us could even speak, we already understood symbols. A smile meant safety. A hug meant comfort. Fire meant danger. Dark clouds meant rain was coming. A mother's face meant security. A baby crying meant something needed attention. Consider this. If the symbol is the language, then the sign is the moment you notice the symbol. What I'm saying is that the message is what your intuition, your higher self, and subconscious are inviting you to understand through that sign. We were communicating symbolically before we were even able to speak, because symbols convey enormous amounts of information instantly. Think about a wedding ring. I don't even have to explain what this means, what it is. Immediately your mind associates it with commitment, with marriage, with love, with partnership, with family, promises. One tiny object and an extraordinary amount of meaning. Or think about the country's flag. It's just a colored fabric, yet millions of people feel emotion the moment they see it. Why? Because symbols carry meaning. Your subconscious has always understood this. In fact, dreams themselves are symbolic. Very rarely does your subconscious communicate literally. Instead, it creates stories, images, metaphors, and experiences, because symbolism is its natural language. But now what happens when we suddenly notice the same thing over and over again, like a koi carp, a white feather, hearts everywhere, a limousine, your dream home on social media, the same animal, the same place? Most people immediately ask, what does this mean? What is this sign telling me? But instead, I ask, why has this symbol become important to me today? Because here's something really fascinating. The same symbol can mean something completely different depending on the person. Imagine three people seeing the same limousine. One person sees it represent wealth. Another person finds that it represents freedom. For somebody else, it reminds them of their wedding day. The same symbol, the same sign, three completely different meanings. Which one is correct? Well, perhaps all of them are, because the meaning isn't inside the limousine. The meaning is inside the person observing it. That's why I don't believe signs come with universal definitions. I believe they have an essence, and it's the essence we need to understand and consider. Now let's consider a stag, the animal. Most people would immediately associate a stag with strength, with leadership, with presence, with confidence, protection, and nobility. So if a stag suddenly appears in your awareness, the interesting question isn't, what does that stag mean? The interesting question is, where are those qualities showing up in my life? Or perhaps, where am I being invited to develop those qualities? Can you see the difference? We're no longer interpreting the object, we're interpreting its symbolic essence. And that's exactly how your subconscious communicates. Now, here's another breakthrough that completely changed the way I think about manifestation. I now don't believe your subconscious is randomly selecting these symbols. Think about how many things you see every single day. Thousands of faces, thousands of words, hundreds of cars, trees, buildings, conversations, songs, images. Your conscious mind couldn't possibly process all of it, so your subconscious filters your reality. It decides what's important enough to bring into your conscious awareness. And psychologists call this selective attention. But I think there's another layer to it, because your subconscious, your intuition, your higher self, and perhaps even the universe itself are working together to draw your attention to symbols that have become relevant in your life right now. Not because the symbol has magical powers, but because the symbol represents something your inner wisdom wants you to notice, to know. That's why curiosity is so very important. Curiosity changes the question. Instead of asking, what does this sign mean? Become curious. Ask, what qualities does this naturally represent? Why has my attention been drawn here today? What might this be reflecting about my current circumstances? What could this be inviting me to notice, to develop, to change? Those questions are transformational, because you're no longer looking outside yourself for answers. You're beginning to have a conversation with your subconscious. Now, after studying my own manifestations for over 14 years, I realized something even more extraordinary. The signs are never the whole story. They're one piece of a very large pattern or picture. Individually, a feather means very little. A dream means very little. A coincidence means very little. But when you begin collecting them, observing them, reflecting on them, patterns begin to emerge. And those patterns tell a story. That's exactly what happened to me. Over 14 years ago, I noticed I wasn't just receiving random signs. I was moving through a repeated cycle, the same emotional experiences, the same symbolic experiences, the same challenges, the same breakthroughs again and again. That observation eventually became my 8-stage mapping manifestation system, not because I invented it, but because I observed it. And once I understood that there was a pattern, everything changed, because belief no longer became just mere hope. Belief became based on evidence. I had watched the same cycle unfolding repeatedly, and that's what I want for you. Not blind faith. Not wishful thinking about manifestation, your own evidence, your own observations, your own patterns. Because once you understand the symbolic language of your subconscious, the world begins to feel very, very different. You stop dismissing things as coincidence. You stop asking people on the internet to tell you what a feather means, what a butterfly means. Instead, you become curious. You begin asking better questions. You begin understanding yourself. And perhaps that's what manifestation has really been all about all along. Not trying to force the universe to speak to you, but learning the language it and your subconscious have been speaking to you your entire life. If you'd like to understand where you are in your manifestation journey and learn how these signs fit into a much larger pattern and picture, I'd love to invite you to my live 1-hour mapping manifestation workshop, where I'll teach you the 8 stages, explain how signs change through the journey, and show you how to interpret them with confidence using your own life as a guide. Because the goal here isn't simply to recognize these signs. The goal is to become fluent in the symbolic language your subconscious has been trying to teach you and to communicate with you all along.